The Waco History Podcast is sponsored by Brotherwell Brewery on Historic Bridge Street in Waco.
Cross the Brazos at Waco, ride hard and I'll make it by dawn. Cross the Brazos at Waco, I'm safe when I reach San Antonio.
Welcome back to the Waco History Podcast. So as I thought of this episode, I'll introduce my guest here in a minute, but when Randy Lane and I started this years ago, we wanted this to be a warts and all podcast. So the goal here is not to celebrate Waco's history, but to understand Waco's history. And so I brought in a colleague of mine, Benna Vaughan. Welcome, Benna.
Hi, thank you.
Benna is a longtime employee, a fellow member of the University Libraries at Baylor University. You've been at Baylor since 2001, and I know you were in the Pogue Legislative Library for
11 years.
11 years. And so you've been about the same time, I guess, now in the Texas Collection.
Right.
So she's a rare manuscripts and books archivist in the Texas Collection, which is officed. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay. Which is officed downstairs from me. So I bug Benna quite a bit. But I am bugging Benna to come in today, and we're going to talk about who, Benna?
Horace Sherman Miller.
Horace Sherman Miller. So if you'll Google it, you know what we mean by wart. But he was a local, and he was a local of some influence. And we're going to get into why, but I would say this, again, as a bit of a disclaimer as we go forward. If we talk about being on the wrong side of history or the right side of history, or those who fought for something and those who fought against, to even honor those that fought for, we need to have a full idea of what they were fighting against. And so in this case, those were fighting for civil rights and equality were fighting against folks like Horace Sherman Miller. And the idea being, if librarians don't do their work as Benna has done her work, we don't have that record. And so what they were fighting for, there's an absence of what they were fighting against. So I'm really proud of the work that Benna has done with this particular collection, organizing it at Baylor University Libraries. But all right, let's jump in, Benna. Tell us a little. Well, give us some of your background, and then we'll move into Horace Sherman Miller, and we'll separate that so we won't mix the two.
My background?
Yeah.
Well, I'm an archivist. I love archival work, and processing collections is one of the main things that I do at the Texas Collection. Mm-hmm. So I work mostly with the Texas documents, so all Texas all the time. That includes Waco. Mm-hmm. And you want me to go into Horace now, or what? You're
not only a certified archivist.
I am.
I know you're involved professionally in archival organizations. So why are archivists important? If somebody's listening and they don't know what an archivist does, why are they important?
Archivists save and preserve records and historical documents of enduring value.
Okay.
And that includes intrinsic value and historical value. So if an archivist doesn't save it, it's not there for
mm-hmm.
posterity. So I feel like it's an important job.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, so we can use an example of what we're about to talk about. This
right.
is a collection that has important historical value here locally. Before we jump into this rather large collection that you worked on, tell us a little bit about who this guy is.
Horace Sherman Miller was a local guy, born in 1889 or so, 1897.
Mm-hmm.
And he lived in Walnut Springs, local country guy, grew up working in the rail yards, lied about his age, and joined the Navy to participate in World War I. Was discharged in 1919, I believe, mm-hmm. but he never saw overseas service, so he went back to the rail yards. And, grew up poor and kind of wandered around, got married, and eventually got struck by lightning in Amarillo when he was there on a rail job. Came back to Waco, developed tuberculosis, went into the sanitarium. His wife left him, and he just kind of went back and forth between the sanitarium and his mom and stepdad's house here in Waco. So that's kind of how he got, a foothold here in Waco. He became an invalid. There's not a lot in his material that tells us too much about his personality prior to this debilitating disease, but he became increasingly bitter, negative. He was, I think, after reading some of his correspondence and looking and reading a thesis that was done on him in '89 by a Baylor student, it kind of feels like he felt put upon, by all of his circumstances. So he began a writing career. Now, he never had anything published nationally. He tried short stories and fiction, and it was not wonderful.
Yeah, you said those nonfiction, fiction books are in the collection.
We have copies.
What were those on? What sort of things was he writing on?
The fiction stuff was kind of like local yokel hayseed stories of that type. He tried to write with a pronunciated drawl to his words, and like some of the stories sound like a country hick kind of sound reading it. So it was cheesy, and not well written. Nothing was ever published, but the things that did get published were his letters to newspaper editors, politicians, things like that. He was sort of white supremacist in view, and after Brown versus the Board of Education, that became very sharply focused. And he joined the Klan, and he only lasted about 2 years. They kicked him out in 1957 because although he was the Texas Kleagle, which is the recruiting officer, he never founded a group in Texas during those 2 years. So they finally just got rid of him. But during this time, he's writing and talking with other like-minded white supremacists in the South, and he develops a newsletter of his own, and he calls his group the Aryan Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And he begins a mail order, so to speak, Klan.
Yeah, so just to back up a little bit, I know he joins the American Confederate Army and the Christian Nationalist political party in '52, and so he is involved in these national organizations for a little bit.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And then the group that you mentioned is a group he comes up with and he creates, right? He does.
When he was ejected from the Klan, I guess that's how you would say it, he continued to put forth his views on white supremacy, which were really all-encompassing, not just against people of color, but Catholics and Jewish people and the government and the military and communism and all of that. So it was more global, and his focus wound up being global.
Okay. And so Brown v. Board happens in '54, and you said that was kind of a galvanizing thing for him, his reaction to that.
Klan in 57 to 59.
Okay.
I mean 55 to 57.
55 to 57. And then going back, I saw he was born in 1901.
Was it 1901?
Yeah,
okay.
So that explains why he needed to lie for the Great War. So as someone who has spent more time in his writings than one should, can you tell me a little bit about the nature of this mail order service, like what is he sending out? How is it organized? That sort of thing.
His newsletter, a lot of it, he takes articles from newspapers and newsletters, and he puts it all together into one conglomerated newsletter, calls it the Aryan Views, and sends it out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, his material is used by other white supremacists, Pyle in Tennessee,
Mm-hmm.
and some others. They get his newsletters, and of course they distribute it to other people, and it just spreads. But he also winds up with a very large global readership
Mm-hmm.
following, especially in South America.
So do you know, like, the sources that he's lifting things from? I mean, how much of it is original content he's creating, and how much of it is just distributing or digesting other?
The newsletter, it looks to be the majority of accumulated work,
Okay.
with just some of his own things put in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of the things that he does get published on his own are those letters to editors and things, and they will publish them in papers, and then he'll include that in his newsletters as well. So I would say mostly it's outside content, not necessarily his.
Okay. And as you established, he's bedridden.
He becomes bedridden. The tuberculosis settles in his bones. They become very brittle, and he does his work from bed with a typewriter hanging over it.
And so this is his mom and stepfather's
Yes.
house. He settles in Waco.
Yes.
And so he's living there. I guess initially he's living there off of them. He can't make a wage. Do we have a sense of kind of how his mail order business evolved?
Well, the majority of his money was spent in publishing this, having it printed, and then mailed.
Okay.
He tried to get the Klan to pay for some of this dissemination, and they did, just for a small bit, but most of it was all him.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, he complains a lot about how much it's costing him to get this stuff out there, but he continues to do it.
Mm. Does he have kind of a cause statement or kind of a byline that, as he publishes, that explains kind of why he sees he's doing what he's doing?
I've seen quite a few different things that he said, but off the top of my, there's so much.
Yeah.
Stephen.
Yeah.
There's so much, and he says things over and over, but then he says different things to other people he's corresponding with. So it's while he talks about white man's party, things of this nature.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall an absolute statement of his own.
Mm-hmm. Are there particular kind of causes or issues that he seems to center on in the content that he's distributing?
Yeah, there are subject files in his collection, and those are the files and material that he collected and that he felt was important to keep, and they are on African Americans, Catholics, Jewish people, communism, the Klan, and the U.S. government and military.
Okay.
So those are the broad umbrellas. And then within that, he would pick up on anything in newspapers. I've got, over 127 different newspaper titles in that collection.
Oh, wow.
I have got over 220 different newsletters. And these are from grassroots groups, religious groups, government groups, foreign material. That's what's so impressive to me about his collection is the breadth of the material he was able to collect about those issues during that time period.
Yeah, and even as we think about the importance of the collection, these may be the only representation of some of these publications that is archived anywhere.
Yes.
I mean, that would be its own research project,
Yes.
which would be a big research project. So this is the 50s, so I got to assume he's getting these via mail.
Yes.
And he's cutting and pasting this thing together?
He is, and the foreign material, he has people in other states translating it for him.
Okay.
And then sending him the translations. So he's cutting, he's pasting, but he also collects full publications
Okay.
of a lot of the journals, magazines, newsletters, and then there are just general publications that don't really, that weren't collected in runs, but are just really interesting and often disturbing material.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah. His business. I mean, how? I'm just interested in kind of a little bit of an insight in the mail order sort of business that he's running in the late 1950s. How he's making it work. I mean, do we know what his subscription rates are or anything like that?
There were some figures in the thesis that was written on him, and this gentleman put together publication amounts and figures and things like that. But I have boxes of addresses, names and addresses, and mailing lists, and things of that nature within the material.
Okay. And I've seen you present on this, and you highlighted kind of the international.
Yes.
And I'm just, in an age of the internet, we know how hate spreads digitally. I'm just trying to wrap my mind around, share, if you would, some of the places that he ends up mailing to.
There are 29 foreign countries that he mails to. A lot of the South America countries, of course, and that kind of makes sense after the war. But also Egypt, Finland, Greece, Israel, Italy, South America, of course, Canada, the United States, Belgium, Austria. I could go on.
Yeah.
I have a list. Mexico, Nigeria.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a sense of how someone in Nigeria would know to sign up mail order for a thing like this.
I don't know. I think that people, contextually during that time period, it was a period of fear for everyone in some way or another. And I think they shared this information and they shared these materials, and it just grew, and it seemed to have grown pretty rapidly.
Yeah.
Which, as you say, with the internet, it's instantaneous. But this seemed to be a rapid spread of material.
So, because he's going to pass away in 62?
64.
64. So we're not talking about a long period here. I mean, he really starts developing this business model, this newsletter, in the late 50s.
I'd say 58.
58. So, and he's going to publish it up until his death, right? Okay. So there's about a 6-year period where this thing is growing.
He puts out about 996 newsletters.
Wow. Okay. So.
Then we've got just about every one of them.
So I'm trying to 996. So.
I'm thinking
is this a weekly or?
I'm thinking it sometimes may have been more than one a week.
Yeah. Okay.
As the need was, so to speak, for him.
Yeah. Is he also gathering responses to his work?
There is, yes. There's a lot of correspondence, incoming and outgoing. So we've got, the things that people were sending him, telling him, calling him Brother Miller, and you're right on, and this is what we need to do, and all of this, and go Aryan. And then you've got the other end, people telling him he's nuts. And then you've got the invitations to the Kennedy dinner the night before the president was assassinated.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And he was anti-Kennedy,
Yeah.
anti-Catholic,
Yeah.
and wrote everyone. So, maybe they just sent him an invitation to try to bring him around. I don't know, but it's in the collection as well.
Oh my gosh. That raises a good point. I mean, what are some other things that you remember coming across? Because this is a collection that sat there for a long time,
It
right?
did.
And was unprocessed.
Interestingly enough, it started coming in 58.
Mm-hmm.
And I've come across correspondence between he and Guy B. Harrison Jr. in the control files that allude to a discussion they had about the collection and Guy B.'s interest in having it.
Okay, so just so other folks will know, Guy B. was the director of
Yes.
the Texas collection
and
at the time.
History professor
Mhm.
at Baylor.
Mhm.
And so he started depositing material in 58.
Mm-hmm.
It would come in increments, big, little. He would, no one was to look at it except for him and the CIA, the FBI, and the people at the Texas collection. Those were the stipulations he was putting in this correspondence I'm looking at.
Did he offer any explanation why he wanted to allow the FBI and the CIA to take a look at it?
I do not.
Okay.
It didn't go into vast detail there, but in his will, which I believe we have a copy of it. I think it was 61, late 61, when
Okay.
he put his collection in the will, and what was left that he had not given
Mm-hmm.
upon his death would come to the Texas collection, and then it was closed for 20 years.
Okay.
So it would not have been available for research without his permission until 1985.
Okay.
But it still sat there, waiting to be processed, and there were probably many, many reasons for that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Context had changed by the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Historical preferences and things that were being studied and things going on in the country, in the world, were not the same as they were in the 50s and 60s in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And then, there may have been a little embarrassment.
Sure.
I mean, are you going to go out and promote this?
Mm-hmm.
And so it sat, and finally decided that something should be done with it.
Can you talk about the decision to begin working on it? Just, how that conversation went, and yeah.
Actually,
Because you took on this task. It's been a lot of work for you.
It
Yeah.
has.
Mm.
It started it. I was finishing up a collection, and I had a grad student, and so I said, "Well, can you inventory this collection for me while I'm finishing this other one up?" And so this was right before COVID, and in 2019. And so she was doing inventories on all the newspapers because there were so many and they had not been inventoried. And then COVID hit, and, we slowed down on the processing. So I worked on the regular files. But the decision to actually process it was kind of it's time.
Yeah.
We need to get this processed. It was large.
Yeah.
And so we were kind of hoping that it would shrink. And that we would make some space for collections coming in right now. That was not the case. Actually, it grew quite a bit.
So it's 128 boxes, if you're
Yes.
wanting to know how big the collection is.
And 41 of those boxes are oversized boxes with large publications in them.
Okay.
So especially, during COVID, and then George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, and it was just like, okay, it's time to own this in a bigger sense than just having it sit on the stacks. This can be used. We're at a college. This can be used in so many different ways. So when we came back and the students came back to campus, bless her heart, I had a undergraduate student assistant who was just starting, and she graduates this next month, and she's finished it with me. So, and some of it was tough for her.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a sit down, okay, we need, a all around the table decision. It was just, okay, let's get it done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one time I did, we assisted with an oral history project on the civil rights movement in Texas prisons. And I had some undergraduate transcriptionists that were listening to the interviews and transcribing it. And I'm wondering and it was very challenging for some of them, some of the things they heard about, some of the things that they were exposed to in the interview. And I didn't think through enough to prepare them.
Right.
Yeah, and so I'm interested. You've been an archivist for a time now. Just thoughts about working in this sort of collection. Are there additional kind of considerations for processing something like this? That
there are.
Yeah.
There are a lot of them. Of course, students today aren't used to seeing this brutal verbiage, images, and things like that. In a different way, yes, but this is very harsh material, and I found that the longer I worked with it, the kind of heavier it became for me, and it wasn't about me, if you know what I mean. I'm an old white woman, okay, and I'm not Catholic and I'm not Jewish, and this is not in my face as it is with so many other people that will be looking at it. So I can't imagine, but I can imagine that this material will be triggering to some, that it will be extremely offensive to most, and that we have to realize that people who are going to come in and look at this may never have been exposed to something this in your face. There's not a piece of plexiglass standing between you and this document telling you how to interpret it. It's all guttural and, emotional and primal in a way, especially some of the more race-related material.
Yeah, you can't, you can't put an asterisk on all of it. It's just hard to prepare someone for this.
And in the finding aid, which is the guide to the collection that people will be able to access online, I say that this material was made in a time that is different from today. And the context of how and when that was created needs to be remembered when you're using it. And we have chosen to leave the folder titles and the words as they were to maintain that context. You can't just get rid of everything. And they need to be able to look at this, and they need to be able to study it and understand why things are the way they are. Yeah,
that's really good. Yeah, we've dealt with this in oral histories that have certain language in them, and you're tempted to scrub.
Yeah.
But if you scrub, then you create a record that's void, those sort of things like we were talking about before. So one of the things that I grabbed his obituary because I was interested in looking at it, and it says he was the subject of many postal inspector investigations. I don't know if it was any of that in the archive that you ran across.
I didn't see that section of it. Now remember, there's so much there. I would still be working on it if I actually read everything. What I do know is that quite a bit of his foreign correspondence, they'll say, don't sign this and send it to a different address. Don't mail this to my home. Don't put my name on this, because especially in South America, Chile, Argentina, they were watching Horace's network there. And I call it Horace's network. That's not what it was, but it was a subgroup of foreign clan type stuff. And they were kind of using his material, and they would they were very careful postally because they would wind up disappearing. I've got friends who've disappeared, things of this nature. It was, and I think I read somewhere in the papers that some of his material has even led to bombings and deaths in South America.
Oh my gosh!
So,
Yeah.
The student using this material recently from Emory University was looking at the networks, the white supremacy networks internationally and globally. And he came across Miller's material in the National Jewish Archive. And it talked in the Argentina files because it talked about the Argentina government watching Miller and his material and looking for it to come into the country.
Well, sometimes you process things and they sit there a while and they're not used. What was it like talking to him after he used some of the collection? What were his reviews of the collection?
Well, he wrote us a very nice write up on it. I thought I brought it, but maybe I didn't. He said that what he was researching was, quote, a global post-World War II matrix of white supremacists that spanned every continent except Antarctica. And that boxes of propaganda from Argentina, Austria, Belgium, India, Palestine, South America, Spain, and the U.S. publishers illuminate a startlingly robust far-right print culture that historians have yet to consider.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So, he says that it's a collection unlike any collection on the Civil Rights era or KKK that he's come across.
Wow.
So, which was pretty high praise. He's been in all these places. And he said that this collection even led him to 2 foreign collections that he needs to check out before he can finish his dissertation.
The back to Horace Sherman Miller for just a minute. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, that's a great validation of the many hours that you guys spent processing this collection and the money that's going to be spent maintaining and preserving the collection.
Right.
The organization that he created, the Aryan
Knights of the
So it really it's not an organization as we would think about it. It's really a subscription club to the newsletter.
Yes, basically.
Yeah.
Basically.
As far as members go,
right.
He was the sole member of he was the lone member of the organization, right?
Yeah. Now,
I was just wondering if it expanded to more of a membership organization.
He would refer to people as brothers, and things of that nature, but it was just more in a, kind of inclusivity type thing. You're a white supremacist too, type thing. I think he is on one list post Un-American Committee, but not anything else. Nothing. No Klan ever really got off the ground during that time period, and he certainly didn't accept this very wide global thing. Now there were some locals. There's plenty of addresses in there.
Those that receive the newsletter, but we don't have a sense that they're meeting or active in that regard. Yeah. Okay. I think. I mean, I can understand why this researcher is looking into it as we think of kind of media networks now,
right.
and where are the roots of those sorts of media networks and how information spreads and how particular information about hate and sentiments of hate spread. I mean, mail order seems to be the great-great-great-great-grandfather of things that we would think about now in contemporary circles. Yeah. Are there any other things that you ran across in the collection that you want to make sure you mention that kind of maybe also shine a light on what you found as you glimpse through? And again, I know you're not holding every piece.
No,
that's not what this involved. But
a lot of shock, just on the different. Again, it was that accumulation that most impressed me, which made it a little difficult to. I even presented on this at conference a year ago, and you get some funny looks when you're promoting the collection of a white supremacist. Yeah. And why is this so great? Well, it's not great for what you think I'm saying it's great for. It is great for that too in its own way, just for understanding and context and knowing why. There are so many things, Stephen, in this collection. I think if I had time to delve deeper, I would go into the correspondence and read it fully, which I don't get to, because I think to be able to understand more how this came about, you've got to read between the lines in his correspondence. I know in the dissertation that Davis wrote in '89, he does go into the correspondence between Pyle and Miller, and it talks about their developing relationship and how Pyle kind of mentors him in writing, because Miller didn't graduate from high school. Yeah. So that's kind of impressive in itself that he would, wind up doing something like this. But he kind of mentors him in tries to better his writing, teach him how to. In fact, one letter talks about how you need to respond to clergy to shut them down when they're trying to say, no, this is not, and that kind of thing. And I think I would go back into that correspondence a lot deeper. Some of the newsletters from grassroots organizations and the things they supported are interesting. I think actually there's a lot of material in support of him and the Klan movement from pastors and things of that nature in there, and that needs to be looked at a little more closely as well. Yeah.
So I think there's a host of avenues of research from the collection. So thanks for your work on it.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for
I hope
acknowledging.
I hope your next project maybe is a little, I do oral history on some rough things, and every now and then I say I'm going to do a puppies and unicorns oral history project.
I'm not going to choose something like this.
You need a sorbet to kind of cleanse the palate a little bit after this, but I sure appreciate your work on it.
Thank you.
And coming and talking about it.
I'm excited that it's going to be used. That's why we do this. We preserve this material for historical research and that kind of thing, and that's what this needs to be used for. Otherwise, it's just taking up space, and we're storage, and that's not what we're there for.
So if you want to go see Benna and take advantage of all the great resources of the Texas collection, they're there in Carroll Library on the first floor. You can come up to the third floor and say hi to me if you want to, but amazing collections there at the Texas collection. Thanks, Benna, for coming in and talking to us.
Thank you, Stephen, for having me.
The Brazos and Waco, ride hard and I'll make it by dawn.
Thanks for listening to the Waco History Podcast. Like what you heard? Subscribe, rate, and review our show on iTunes so we can reach more listeners. You can find show notes and info on every episode at wacohistorypodcast.com, and more info on Waco's past at wacohistory.org. Our theme music, used with permission, is Cross the Brazos at Waco, performed by the late Billy Walker. For more info on Billy's music, go to billywalker.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. This has been a Rogue Media Network production.